You're listening to KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas, the voice of the people, voted best radio station for music 2 years in a row by the Dallas Observer.
Did you know that KNON podcasts all of its local talk shows? KNON has local talk, each show covering your community in its own unique way. So if you missed one of our great morning talk shows, you can go back and listen to it online. We keep the shows for 2 months so you can hear everything you have been missing out on. Visit KNON.org for more information about the KNON Morning Talk Shows podcast. Also available on iTunes.
What a game! What a game!
Jim Schutze here with Get Off My Lawn, or as another man might call it,
Get Off My Lawn.
All right. We're up on that. That's great. And you tuned into the right place. This is Jim Schutze, Get Off My Lawn, the KNON community radio version of a feature I write every weekday for the Dallas Observer on the Observer's webpage. I want you to call me up at 972-647-1893 so we can chat this morning. That's 972-647-1893. If you're like me, you may be suffering from holiday surfeit, meaning too much. Too much cheer, too many Christmas carols, the scent of pine in the air, and if you're really unlucky, Christmas cookies all over the place, and you may be you may have my reaction to it, which is
Get off my lawn.
You know, let's imagine that Saint Nick himself is up there on the roof, and you hear the clatter of hooves, and you hear that merry laugh. So if you're like me, you might step out of the door and say, yeah, well, get off my lawn. Anyway, you get the picture. This is my way of warning you that, surprise, surprise, this is not a holiday upbeat show that I have in mind. It's a bit of a downer, but it's something that's on my mind, and I think it ought to be on all of our minds. And so I'm hopeful that in the year ahead, we can find a way to talk about this very difficult topic. It's one that's been nosing its way into the news, and we've been talking about it here on Get Off My Lawn, off and on, bits and pieces for the last few weeks. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's the story. It started with this whole business about the golf course that the city wants to build. I promise I'm not going to talk about the golf course again. I sort of promise. I'm going to try to control myself. But I do want to talk about Southern Dallas. That's the topic of a column I have in the Observer this week, in the print product, as we call it, the newspaper. I'm looking at it right now, and I'm looking at the illustration, which is kind of ironic. You know, I'm a writer, so obviously I don't do my own illustrations, and I don't get to choose them. I'm a worker bee. I do my piece, and other people do their pieces. So this illustration is a bunch of bummy-looking white guys. I guess they're made to look tough. Leaning against a fence, smoking cigarettes. They got tattoos on their arms. It kind of looks like a story meeting at the Observer. These are supposed to illustrate a story that I've written about Southern Dallas and a phenomenon called not in the labor force. Well, it's sort of a do-around because somebody didn't want to have an illustration of African American people leaning on that fence, not doing any work, smoking cigarettes, and so on. But that's what the topic is. And I think the fact that this illustration shows a bunch of white guys leaning on the fence demonstrates how sensitive these issues are because of the undercurrent of racism. It's really difficult to talk about what goes on in southern Dallas. How can you talk about it without dealing with the issue of racism and the accusation of racism? I wrote a Get Off My Lawn for the webpage Friday, in which I said, I'm sure that there are people who are going to be out there reading this thinking, why is Schutze talking about this issue only in relation to black people in southern Dallas? Could he not find enough white meth heads in the Grove to write about? And I, point taken. But the issue I'm talking about is about southern Dallas, and it is in particular about African American kids. And it comes up, here's how it comes up. When I started looking at the golf course, I wanted to know what the economy was like because the whole deal, it's not just the golf course. They're going to do this golf course, cost $150,000 to join. They're going to have a horse park for people who want to do dressage. That's the thing where you wear a tuxedo and you jump over hedges like the royal family. And they want to install these things in southern Dallas because they say it's going to help turn around the economy there. So I wanted to know, what's the economy? And I started looking at it. We have all kinds of data available, pretty easily available in this world, in this country, if you want to study something like this through the U.S. Census. So I started looking at the census tracts in this area, and I thought, let's look at unemployment. And unemployment's not good in the area. It's around 10 to 11%. Employment generally in the country is down more like 7%. So that's pretty bad. That's like 50% higher. So you can say there's an unemployment problem, and then bang, I saw this other number that made me realize that I wasn't even looking at the right stuff. In the census tracts, in this corridor down through southern Dallas that's on both sides of the river, the west side, which people sometimes call Oak Cliff, usually erroneously, but Cadillac Heights and on down from that area, and the east side, which is a lot of it's, well, you start up around Bonton, which is an African American neighborhood. You come down through the Grove, which is whiter and more Hispanic. Down that corridor, you have this phenomenon called not in the labor force. And that's not unemployment. That doesn't count as unemployed. That's people who never had a job, and they didn't have one before. They don't have one now, and they're not looking for one. They're not going to get one. So they don't. Unemployed means sort of disemployed, like you had a job and you lost it. Not in the labor force means that you never have a job. You are outside the economy. You're outside the formal economy. You're not a part of it. And the percentage of people who live in this corridor down through southern Dallas that I'm talking about, in the target census tracts I'm talking about, and we're talking about half a dozen census tracts, the percentage of people who are not in the labor force is over 50%. Over 50%. In some of the census tracts, it's 60% who are not in the labor force at all. And so I think that raises a question. How can that be? You know, the same week that I was looking at this stuff, our mayor, Mike Rawlings, was on NPR. There's a new show called The Takeaway. And they interviewed him because Forbes magazine had declared that 3 cities in America have officially left the recession. I forget what the other 2 are, but Dallas is the biggest one. Dallas is the only big city in the country that, according to Forbes anyway, is no longer in the recession. And the reason for that is because that is because of the job creation in Dallas, which is better than anybody else's in the country. There are more jobs here. There are more people looking for people to hire here than in any other big city in the country. And so, and Rawlings, Rawlings was his usual self. He's a pretty smart guy, and buoyant, and a great salesman for the city, and he was pushing this fact that yeah, this is a city of great opportunity. Why wouldn't he push that? That's that's his job as the mayor. But the question is, if that's true, if there are all these jobs in this economy, if this is the job creatingest economy of all big cities in the country, how can you have this corridor where 50% of the people to 60%, a majority of the people, never have jobs? I did some research on this phenomenon called not in the labor force to see what economists say about it nationally. Are people not in the labor force because jobs are not available? And this kind of gets us to this. We're starting to get into the territory I want to talk about. This gets us to this idea that people in southern Dallas do not have jobs because there aren't jobs there. There aren't jobs in their neighborhood. So we need to create jobs in their neighborhood so they'll have jobs. Well, all of the wisdom, all of the study, all of the hardcore data on not in the labor force says that's not true. You can put jobs there. They're not going to go get those jobs for some reason. For some reason. Here's how they know that. You have this number of people who are not in the labor force, and employment goes up. Employment, the picture gets better in the country. There's a hard core at the center of that not in the labor force number that stays the same. Employment goes down. The not in the labor force number stays the same. It's not affected by employment rates. It's not affected by opportunity. You have people who are simply, for some reason, outside the economy. And I think this challenges a lot of traditional liberal conservative debate. No disrespect to the wonderful program that precedes me here, but it challenges some of the notions about labor and union reform and so on. None of that has anything to do with the people who are permanently outside the labor force. So then, we can get to a question of how come? How come they are? And why is it so concentrated in this area? And by the way, you may have better thoughts about this than I do. Call me up and let me know. Call me at 972-647-1893. 972-647-1893. This is Jim Schutze with
Get Off My Lawn.
But I really want you on the lawn. This morning, I want to hear from you on this difficult topic. And we're talking about why we have this core of people in the city who are outside the labor force. Now, some of those people are probably in the labor force. They're working. They're working, they're doing informal labor, cash labor. Not those labor pool jobs. Those get counted. But I'm talking about the guys who are, you pull up at behind the Fiesta in your pickup truck, and it's obviously you're looking for some concrete workers, and there's a whole big stack of guys waiting. And a bunch of them run out and start telling you that they can do the job you want. And they want to jump in the truck and go to work. So who are those guys? Now, let me think. Let's be real honest about this. I'm looking at this illustration here over my column in The Observer that shows these tough-looking white guys leaning on the fence. Are they the guys that I see out behind Fiesta? No. Is it black guys who are out behind Fiesta looking for that day labor? No. We know who those guys are. Those are Hispanic guys. Those are Mexican guys. Those are the guys who are looking for that hard work every day. And we understand that phenomenon. And when we look around our city, that's who's doing that work. That's who you see on the street. You don't just see them on private sector jobs. You see them on city jobs, state jobs, all kinds of jobs. They're working for the contractor who's working for the big guy. So we understand that phenomenon. But when we look at southern Dallas, and we look at this phenomenon of people who are permanently outside the labor force, who aren't out behind Fiesta looking for day labor, we're talking a lot about African American families and people and young men. And if you disagree with me, call me up, 972-647-1893. I spent some time going to people whose opinions I trust, people I've talked to over the years, and I sought out some new people to talk about this. One is probably one of the most thoughtful guys in the city, the Reverend Gerald Britt, who is with an organization called City Square, used to be called Central Dallas Ministries. Gerald Britt has been a longtime pastor in southern Dallas. He now works for City Square, which attempts to bring development and opportunity to parts of the city that need it. So Gerald Britt knows this ground. And I asked him what his impression is of people outside the labor force. He said, some of them are in the labor force. They just you don't see them. They don't show up. They're selling CDs at the car wash. They've got some kind of subsistence level hustle that they're doing. It's not easy. You get out and try to do it. You know, they're working. They've got some way to put together money, and whatever they can get from public assistance, which is very stingy in Texas, so it's not much, maybe nothing in some cases. But he said a lot of them also just simply, this is a cultural moral thing. They do not see themselves as part of the working world, the formal economy. And he said, if you put an employment center with 1,000 jobs in the middle of those census tracts that I'm talking about, the people I'm talking about are not going to go apply for the jobs. They're convinced that they won't get the jobs. But they also, as he put it, just don't see themselves as part of that world. Now, I talked to another southern Dallas pastor, the Reverend Eddie Lane, at Bible Way Bible Church, which is on Ann Arbor Street in a very poor part of the city. Reverend Lane has been there 47 years. And I think we got a break coming up. I want to tell you what Reverend Lane had to tell me, which is very, very moving. But we'll talk about it in the next sector. Here's that sad music that means I have to leave you for a minute, but I'm coming back. Jim Schutze, get off my lawn. See ya.
If it's time to get rid of your old gas guzzler, the KNON Vehicle Donation Program can help. There is still a market for those old vehicles, and if you donate it, you are helping to support the quality programming here on KNON. Just call 877-KNON-AUTO or go online to KNON.org. We'll take care of everything from pickup to tax paperwork. That's 877-KNON-AUTO.
Don't be a Scrooge. Give the blues to the music lover on your list.
KNON has the perfect CD or LP for you. Texas Blues Radio, Volume 5.
Texas Blues Radio, Volume 5 features acoustic blues, instrumental blues, party songs, somebody done somebody wrong songs.
Baby Got a Good Thing songs, six-pack and devilback songs.
Gumbo, jive, T-bone, and hip-shaking songs from a fine selection of great Texas blues artists.
So do right by the blues and give some Texas blues this year.
Texas Blues Radio, Volume 5 CD is available at KNON.org, Forever Young Records in Grand Prairie, Record Town in Fort Worth, and in Dallas at Bill's Records and Rewind Music.
Download a copy at cdbaby.com.
The LP is only available at Forever Young Records.
All proceeds are a gift to KNON.
Jim Schutze, back with Get Off My Lawn. We've been talking about Southern Dallas and people outside the labor force. A difficult issue that I believe runs beneath a whole lot of other issues that we struggle with in Dallas. Again, I want to invite you to call me up with your feelings about this, 972-647-1893. Before the break, I was telling you of one visit I paid to a clergyman in Southern Dallas, the Reverend Eddie Lane at Bible Way Bible Church. And I wanted to talk to him about who's outside the labor force. He's been in the community for 47 years. Reverend Lane is an emeritus professor at the Dallas Theological Seminary. He's a thoughtful guy, smart guy, and knows this scene well. And at first he balked at my suggestion that there was this huge number of people who never work. And he said he knows an awful lot of people in his community who work hard. After we talked about it for a while, he made kind of a generational distinction. He said, you know, the older people around here all worked all their lives. But he conceded that among the young people, there's a huge number of young people who don't work. His answer was that they don't work because they can't work. Nobody's going to hire them. And he talked to me about why. The secret, he said, was that these kids bounce out of DISD functionally illiterate. They cannot read and they cannot write. And so right out of school, nobody's going to hire them. They have the dreams and the ambitions and the fantasies of all young people, going to do great, going to have a great life, an exciting life, going to do well. They have the same, you know, whatever we mean when we say American dream, I think it's a pretty materialistic dream. It's a dream that gets preached at us all day long on TV, but we all see it and we're all subject to it. They have that dream, but they don't have a way to get to it because they can't read and they can't write. And so they wind up selling drugs or something like that. And Reverend Lane told me that he's just seen this river of tens of thousands, not thousands, tens of thousands of young people over the years who go straight from home and bounced out of DISD straight to prison, early, straight to prison. And I asked him, well, when they get out, what are they like? Are they real tough? You know, I learned how to be a career criminal in prison, and that's what I'm going to do. He said, no, not many of them. He said most of them come out of prison really scared, really convinced that, man, I don't ever want to go back there. And I've learned my lesson, and I'm going to have a decent life and an honest life, and I'm going to work for a living and get a job. And then what they discover is that they're not going to get a job. They're not going to get a job. They still can't read. They still can't write. And now they're ex-cons. And so they fall back into the same tempting ways that are all around them, and not too long, they go back to prison. The numbers he's talking about you could describe as a Holocaust. I mean, it's just, if you think of all these wonderful little babies that come into the world, and you look at those babies when they're brand new, and you imagine them being packed off to the pen by the age of 18, it's horrendous. Now, we still, however, we're still talking about something that's kind of the fault of institutions. And, you know, we're going through all kinds of stuff about our superintendent of schools. We brought in this new superintendent of schools, Mike Miles, with great fanfare and great hope. Now he's in all kinds of trouble over hiring people for too much money, this and that. Typical school district stuff. That it's just this terrible, terrible show that we've seen before. I wrote a thing last week I admit, I wrote this on the Dallas Observer version of
Get Off My Lawn,
in which I said that Miles was toast, that he'd made too many mistakes, and he's got to be out of here. You know what? I sometimes think back through this stuff after it's too late, after it's already in print, and I hope he's not toast. I hope he's not toast, because he's a really smart guy, and I think that he's a tough guy. And look, how can we look at DISD and say, oh, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing? Obviously, we can't keep doing what we're doing. What we're doing is terrible. Those numbers of kids who are bouncing out of there, they're not all black kids either. A lot of them are Hispanic kids who leave unable to read or write. There are poor white kids who leave unable to read or write. There's nothing about what comes out of the school district that's acceptable. And the school district needs somebody to get in there and kick some butts and take some names. And I do think that's what Miles is trying to do. I see we've got a... I think I finally, by defending Mike Miles, I've churned up a caller. So we'll see who that is and what's coming. But I'm saying that there has to be change in the school district. However, how do we know? How do we know that it's the school district's fault? Look at the number of people. Look at the leadership that's butted its head against that wall over the decades, and the wall always wins. How do we know that there's this model that somehow it's the business community's fault because they didn't put enough jobs in southern Dallas? Well, first of all, come on. People don't put jobs near you. You have to go get near a job. You have to go seek a job. You have to get the job. You have to get yourself to the job. That's how it works. The job doesn't come to you. And in the third place, this number that I'm talking about, that I started talking about, not in the labor force, puts the lie to the idea that the solution is to create employment centers in this area. If you're talking about a culture that's not looking for employment, what about that? And what about the school district? I mean, are we right to beat the hell out of Mike Miles if you've got a parallel issue of rejectionism, of an oppositional culture in the school district that doesn't want to learn to read and write? What about that? We'll talk about that in a minute. I want to take this call from Michael on line 4. Are you still with us, Michael?
Yes, sir.
What's up today?
Well, I'm a guy who walks flyers for a living. I don't call it walking paper myself. I call myself an advertising distributor.
Yes.
And of course, I haven't paid any taxes for 12 years. And I've seen a lot of crazy things out there. One day I was walking to school, and you're on the subject of schools right now, so I thought I'd mention. I saw it on the key. It had something for these children called early release, and it had a date for it. And I don't even know what that program was. I heard it had something to do with kids that have a job or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I thought, what in the world are they putting that on a sign for everybody to drive by and see? That's a term that has to do with jail. And
yeah.
And I'm going, wait a minute, we're all driving by this in broad daylight and looking and seeing, knowing that our kids, busing didn't work out, so rich people took all their kids out of the public schools, and now we're stuck with training camps for prison.
Right.
For the public schools. And I just think it's horrendous that people will drive by and see this every day, and only, people like you, are very few of us are saying anything about it. I just wanted to thank you for saying something about it and just get that thing on the air, that early release. Can you imagine them doing that to our children, offering them something called early release?
Well, Michael, it's a very interesting point, because I've talked to kids who've gone to the alternative schools. That's where they send you if you mess up in a regular high school. And they describe the alternative schools as an excellent preparatory school for prison. They really, they teach you how to be a prisoner, how to think like a prisoner, how to hate the guards and all that stuff.
It's horrendous, and people, I smoke weed, I've gone to jail a few times. They keep all that stuff illegal and this active, thriving drug market available for kids, so that they can make money, so that they can put them in jail and keep this big money machine going of rehab and all that stuff. Drugs are a medical problem, not a criminal problem.
Yeah, and if you have this really lucrative economy sitting there, and you tell all these kids, okay, look, you're not in the real economy. Don't even knock on the door. You don't read, you don't write. You got a record. Don't come around here looking for a job. But right out there, look out the window, man. There's an economy where you can earn yourself some nice wheels and be a star.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and the boss isn't mean. I mean, in most cases, your boss isn't mean. There's like a cooperative sort of almost camaraderie about it. It breaks down pretty easily. But there's what's bad about the adversarial capitalist economy we have is your bosses are mean. There's always you take a job, you think you're going to make it, and then there's that lousy supervisor that thinks you're the enemy because you're a worker. We are not adversaries. We don't have to be. But in this economy of capitalism, we are, and it's very unfortunate.
Well, look, Michael, I thank you. These are very interesting thoughts you've brought to us, and thanks for calling.
Okay, keep it up. Thank you very much.
Sure. We're talking now. I was just kind of getting around to the matter of schools, and I wanted to mention a guy I mentioned in Get Off My Lawn this week online, who's somebody I've been sort of vaguely aware of for years. He's a Nigerian-American anthropologist / sociologist. He's no longer living. I think he died like 5 years ago. His name was John C. Ogbu, O-G-B-U, Ogbu. And he did a bunch of pioneering work in the 70s about minorities, not necessarily in the United States. He started here, but because of his background, he looked in Africa, and he looked in the Asian subcontinent, he looked at India, and he looked at Europe. And he did this really interesting work about what is a minority. And he came up with a classification system for types of minorities. He had autonomous minorities, voluntary minorities, and involuntary minorities. In this country, autonomous minorities would be people like the Mormons, the Amish, Jews, people who read the Dallas Observer, people who are minority kind of on purpose, and they got their own deal going, they got their own culture, they're happy with it, just leave us alone. You know, they're a minority because they sort of want to be. Then he had the voluntary minorities, and those would be immigrants. People who come here from other countries, come here from Mexico, come here from Eastern Europe, come here from Yemen, but they come here seeking opportunity, and they have issues. They don't quite get the culture here because it's new and different, but they're willing to put up with it. They're willing to put up with a lot because they're here to make their way. Then you have involuntary minorities, didn't want to come here, didn't ask, got brought here involuntarily, and then treated very badly and given the back of the hand by the majority culture. So, you know, one of the things I think in the minority culture, even among liberals, that we always assume about minorities who've been mistreated is that they would resent and hate the majority culture. Yeah, that's probably true, but the thing that the majority misses is that the minority culture that's an involuntary minority also does not respect the majority culture. Why would it? What is there to admire there? And so the involuntary minority culture tends to reject the culture and the values of the majority culture. So they become an oppositional culture. And Ogbu pointed out that these things become really important when you look at people's attitudes toward education. The autonomous minorities tend to view education as a really important leg up, and they go after it. The voluntary minority may look at education as sort of a mystery. You know, why do these gringos want us to do this and that? Why do they think it's so great? But they're kind of willing to give it a shot. The culture of the involuntary minority tends to be oppositional where education is concerned. The education that we're being offered is nothing but another face of oppression. It's another expression of the values of these people we don't like and we don't respect. And so they want to tell us all about the values they think we should have. Why should we listen to them? There's an expression of dignity and independence that can come across as opposition to the culture of the oppressor. Why don't you go teach yourself, you know? Why don't you go read your own great books? We don't need it. So there's a tradition of opposition that can come up among an involuntary minority. And in the last segment of this very upbeat Christmas show that we're having here, after the break, it is, after all, a show called
Get Off My Lawn.
So what do you expect? In the last segment, I want to bring some of this home a little more to Dallas and to the school situation. But the general principle that Ogbu identified was that when you start talking about minorities in education, you got to figure out what minority are you talking about, and who are you? From what vantage point do you talk? If you are the majority culture and you're dealing with an oppositional culture that doesn't respect you, then what are the chances that you're going to be able to talk these people into your values? And by the way, why do you think you're so great? Those are all issues that become very important. They become really important when we talk about Dallas, and we're going to do that some more after the break. This is Jim Schutze with Get Off My Lawn. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back to wrap it up.
Howdy, y'all. This is Johnny Baker Jr. from Oak Cliff, Texas. The only type of Blue Monday I can stand is if Fats Domino is playing the piano. To fix this, start your week right. Listen to the Magic Time Warp Show with Ranger Rita, Action Annie, and Rockin' Robin. Soothe your Monday morning groove from 7 to 9 a.m. right here on KNON 89.3. We are the voice of the people.
Transparency is the home.
211 Texas, a program of the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, is committed to helping Texas citizens connect with the services they need. Whether by phone or internet, our goal is to present accurate, well-organized, and easy-to-find information from over 60,000 state and local health and human services programs. We have programs ranging from child care to GED instruction, from dental care to food pantries to public utility services. Contact 211 at 211texas.org or dial 211 to connect with the resources you need. If dialing 211 directly doesn't work on your telephone, you can call 877-541-7905 for 211 Texas. Don't let your family go without the help they need.
Hey, babes, take one.
Jim Schutze, back with Get Off My Lawn. And we're talking about Dallas and deep-running issues that we struggle with in this city, and we never seem to get, we seem to run around the same track for years and years and years. In particular, I'm talking about Southern Dallas, the economy, and about the school system and what's what. And Is somebody to blame? Is there somebody who can fix it? The other phenomenon that strikes me, because I've been around Dallas for a long time. You know, I said once, my wife is a native Texan. We were out someplace, and I told somebody that I'd lived in Texas so long that I was starting to feel like a real Texan. We got home, and my wife told me basically not to say that to people because it's not true. Isn't that something, to get that from your own spouse? But I have been here a long time, and I've been in Dallas looking at this stuff for a long time, and I see these terrible patterns that never change. However, the biggest change that I've seen over time, if you want to talk about the African American community in southern Dallas, you compare now to 1978 when I got here, the big story about black people in this area is success. It's upward mobility. It's very dramatic. Anybody who's been around as long as I have been would tell you that if they're honest about it. You compare the picture that was here on the ground in the 70s, and you compare what's here now, and the huge, the overarching story is upward mobility. Those affluent African American neighborhoods that you see scattered across the southern part of the county just didn't exist in the 70s at all. And in the northern suburbs, you have a kind of different phenomenon, but it's very pronounced. You have incredible diversity in those, a lot of those affluent suburbs. Some of it's move-in diversity from elsewhere, but a lot of those are people whose families started out in southern Dallas and have simply moved into the mainstream culture. There is also in southern Dallas, sometimes you get the story that southern Dallas is left behind and there's nobody there who cares about them. Well, that's not true. If you visit these huge mega churches in southern Dallas, you see great work being done and great. I'm not a real religious guy, but I have to admit, when I've been in some of those places, it's incredible the message that's given to people and the programs that are available, and it's all about getting out of the oppositional culture, getting into the labor force, getting going, and you hear a lot of values that are pretty conservative to a libtard like me, but you know, they're the values of self-reliance and getting on with life. However, there is still this phenomenon of a left-behind culture in these census tracts I'm talking about, and it's really left behind. It's way behind. And what is the leadership that preaches to that culture? You know, years ago, I was a big fan of Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price. He and I knew each other pretty well and had lunch together and talked a lot. We're on not so great terms now because of a disagreement we've had over the development called the Inland Port. Commissioner Price used a lot of his influence to fight the port. Let me hold that thought for a second. I want to talk to Tommy here on line one. Tommy, what's up with you today?
I just wanted to tell you, I find some of your points very interesting. The one thing that I've noticed after walking the earth is 50 years is a white male that at one time felt he had some middle class chance of rising above, but doesn't it quite feel that way anymore. I would like to point out, however, I've noticed that the so-called minorities have not gotten the hang of cutting down their breeding yet, the way for lack of a better word, white culture has since the 40s, since after the Second World War.
Well, Tommy, let me ask you a question, because I happen to be a guy who's spent a lot of time in East Texas, and I don't know who you're talking about, but I see in East Texas a really a trend toward very early marriage or non-marriage, and kids, we're talking about white kids dropping out of high school, having babies early.
Yeah,
so I'd have to
what
see.
They're around. Can we not agree that that's what they're exposed to? Because the other cultures are not taking that to heart the way the white culture, Caucasian culture did from after the Second World War.
But I'm disagreeing. I'm disagreeing with you about the white culture. I just think if you look at the numbers, if you wanted to look at all of the unwed teenage mothers in this country, if you put them all on a stage, you wouldn't even see the black or Hispanic kids because there'd be so many white kids there.
I agree, but can you argue that statistically that we cut down from 5 or 6 kids on a farm to 2.5? I mean, that's common knowledge.
Oh. I don't know. Tommy, I appreciate your call. Thanks for calling.
Well, if you want to help some of these opposing cultures, you might point that out. The ones that are succeeding have turned down their breeding. You got a valid point about white girls having babies.
Yeah.
And if you look, they breed babies most of the time. And that's because it's what they're around. We no longer teach our children that.
Okay.
The responsibility of it. They have broken the culture that we set for an example.
This is one of those moments where we have to just say,
"Get off my lawn."
You know, the breed babies. What are breed babies? Are those like those terrorist babies that we heard from during the presidential primary that were coming up here with bombs inside them or something? Anyway, see. That's what happens. That's why this is so tough to talk about. Because the minute you bring it up, you stir up all this stuff. And usually what happens is we give up. Liberals give up, conservatives give up. Because we think, oh man, I don't want to be in the middle of a conversation about breed babies. I don't want to have that conversation. I don't want to be associated with it. And so we give up. And we go back to these paradigms, the same stuff that we've been talking about forever that gets us nowhere. One of the most salient points I gathered in talking to people in southern Dallas about the phenomenon there is that if you are talking about an oppositional culture that rejects the values of the mainstream culture, the mainstream culture is not going to change that. The oppositional culture can only change from within. That's a point that Reverend Eddie Lane made to me, that he said that what's needed is a huge kind of elaborate form of what we think of as rehab, where you take these kids who've already had one really bad turn in life. Maybe they've been to the pen already, and they're back on the street, and you do the stuff they need to turn their lives. You got to teach them. You got to teach them to read and write. You got to do what the schools failed to do. And you've also got to teach them these basic values of how to get a job, how to have a job. You don't wait for the job to come to you. You go get a job. You have to teach them why it's good to have a job, why the way you stay out of prison is putting up with mean bosses and so on. You have to teach all that. But you can't, but it's got to be done from within the community. That's the kind of resource or program that you have to make a change. And as I said a little bit ago, I'm not arguing that none of that's being done. I think the churches are doing some of it. Let me take a pause and talk to Vernon here on 3. Vernon, what's up this morning? Vernon.
Hey, what's going on? How you doing?
How are you?
Okay, yeah, I was been listening to your conversation and your dialogue on the changes that has happened and occurred in the Dallas area, and then you were saying some positive things, and then this gentleman called. I don't know if I want to classify him as a gentleman, but he called and
whatever
and like
that was. Yeah.
Yes, he stirred up some mess. But see, that's the problem right there. Those guys cannot let the past go because the past is not going anywhere.
Right.
When you got individuals that's constantly passing it on to the next generation, and Dallas has I call it candy-coated racism because it's there and it's not going anywhere. Because everybody adapts themselves to whatever they have to adapt just to survive personally, and it's not a big picture of trying to change it for everyone because they want to make it personal, and this is the reason we can't get out of the box as far as let's say God's children, should I say, because we shouldn't be separated.
No,
we shouldn't be separated.
Vernon, I agree, and those guys wind up ruling because if you and I are having trying to have a difficult, civilized conversation about a problem, and a third guy comes up and starts saying nasty stuff about our mothers, well, then the conversation's over.
Yeah, there goes to another area. But the problem is, I think I came to the conclusion that those that want to operate under the guidelines of the Bible and God's way of creating us all, we all are His children. We'll make some progress, and you'll be happy with the environment that you may be in. But if you're trying to pass that message and get the majority of the folks on this earth to do so, it's not going to happen because we got this generation of pass down. I mean, it is constantly here. I mean, people need to wake up and smell the coffee. You're either gonna, God in the Bible, I haven't read where there's a black heaven or a white heaven or a black hell or white hell. We're either going one or the other, and you're going to be there with if you do the honors to get to heaven, you're going to be seeing every race there. I mean, we will not be looked at as a race. A child of God is what you'll be. But if you're going to burn in hell, if you choose to go that route, that's what you're going to do. Well, and I just think that if everyone would just realize and do a self-check and see where they are personally.
Look, Vernon, I agree with you absolutely. I think that it's possible to define the kind of sentiment we heard that from that guy as evil itself, as the thing that will bring us all down if we're not able to defeat it. If there's a battle between good and evil, that we know what side that guy's on, and the jury's out. We don't know which side wins that battle.
And you want to know the scary part of that? That is not just a local guy, but that attitude that he has goes all the way to Washington and everywhere else. We saw that clearly during this last presidential election. I mean, this country was so divided, and it was black and white. I mean, that's basically where we are. And it's sad, but it's true. And
you got to give a little break to that 40% of the white folks who came across. Listen, Vernon, I thank you. I got Randy on line 4, and I'm running out of time. Let me jump to Randy. Thank you for calling.
Have a great day.
Randy, what's up?
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Hey, you was naming the different categories of minorities at the very beginning of this discussion, and the one at the beginning, what did you say it was, where it was like the Amish and
autonomous, independent? They're sort of like they're minorities on purpose. They define themselves as minorities. They got their own culture, their own belief. They got their own hats. And they're happy being what they are, and they just as soon have everybody leave them alone.
And most of those that you put in that category that I heard are relatively successful as a thriving community, right?
Yeah, they're very focused, and they have a culture of success.
So, and then the other category that we were just discussing, that gentleman was discussing, was the involuntary minority.
Yeah.
Which, how do you go from the mindset of being the involuntary minority that doesn't respect the standing minority in any way? Some want to be part of the standing culture, some don't, for whatever reason. How do you get how does their mindset change from that to the one at the top, which seems to be the most successful?
I don't know. That's above my pay grade, but we know it does. We know it does because we see this phenomenal success and upward mobility. If you charted the arc of black people over history, it'd be one of the great success stories of all history in this country.
But that's not what we're hearing in Dallas. I mean, I hear all the time in Dallas how, and I see it, but
yeah,
it's hard for people to come. I mean, even earlier in today, it was a situation where you would have thought that South Dallas hasn't changed since the 1970s.
There are parts of it that have absolutely have not. And Randy, you're absolutely right. And that's the phenomenon. We're really not talking about black people here, are we?
No, we're talking about economics.
We're talking about a specific set of neighborhoods and a bunch of factors that must not be black, because what about all the successful black people? We're talking about a specific turf on the ground.
Correct.
That it just happens to be a really terrible, terrible place for kids and young people. You know, you go back to the wonder of a baby. How wonderful is a baby? And the thought that all those babies are headed to the pen. How can we live with that? That's a scary thing.
Well, you know, Jim, only thing I can say about it is, like you're saying, the DID issue, but as I can attest to, that more than 80-something% of the people that are in jails and get these felonies are on what? The drug war that's continued for 35 years.
Yeah.
See you later. Great show, Jim.
Thank you. Thanks very much. This is Jim Schutze bringing you the holiday season downer program. I was worried that you might have OD'd on all that Christmas stuff, the Christmas carols and the cookies and the children's choirs and so on. And so I knew that you'd be looking for just a little bit of
get off my lawn.
And so that's why I brought you this program as a sort of antidote. And I'm sure that on the program following, you're just going to be singing carols, and maybe not. I see some people shaking their heads no. But hey, look, if you want Christmas, just walk, go to North Park and walk around. You'll have it coming out your ears. Go to Town East. Take your money. That's part of the deal. But if you want Christmas, maybe this isn't the best place. This is the best place to learn what to say. Remember this: if you do hear somebody up on the rooftop and you hear the clatter of hooves, you need to remember to walk out front and tell them,
get off my lawn.
See you next week.
You're listening to KNON 89.3 FM in Dallas, the voice of the people, voted best radio station for music 2 years in a row by the Dallas Observer.
Did you know that KNON podcasts all of its local talk shows? KNON has local talk, each show covering your community in its own unique way. So if you missed one of our great morning talk shows, you can go back and listen to it online. We keep the shows for 2 months so you can hear everything you have been missing out on. Visit KNON.org for more information about the KNON Morning Talk Shows podcast, also available on iTunes.